Welcome back to my recaps of the Canadian Open. This one was the penultimate round of the event. I got paired with another lower rated player this time around, and we're both at 4 out of 7. So if I get a win in this round, then I would go into the final one with 5 out of 9 and with a chance to finish 6 out of 9, which would be a pretty acceptable score for me. So to start, we played the Benko here. Again, just like my game against John Fedorowicz in round 2. But he plays a slightly different variation. Now, the funny thing is that we played theory here after e3, and then he plays e6, which is a rarer move, but I think it's a decent way to play with e6. I think white is still quite a bit better in these lines with d takes e6. And the big problem is that black cannot really complete his development so easily without allowing me to play a quick e4 and blow open the center. So the whole idea of this line, of course, for black is that after I develop here, black plays quick d5. So it looks like black is doing quite well in the center here. He has sacrificed the pawn on the flank in order to increase the central control. Now here's where I start faltering a little bit. So I go knight f3. This is all fine. And following bishop to d6, this is already the first inaccuracy, I believe. I think c4 is what most people play here in order to just lock everything down and prevent our bishop from recapturing on b5. So here, either white takes on a6, or he just goes like bishop d2, and the game goes on. But after bishop d6, the reason why this is inaccurate is it actually allows me to play the immediate e4. Now, I knew this idea from the main line here. This is not exactly the most popular way for black to play this line, but this e4 idea is one of white's main, one of white's main ideas to fight back in the center here against this strong pawn formation. Now, of course, if black takes, then we just go knight g5 and we collect the pawn, so that's no good. For instance, after d takes e4, knight g5, there's no way to defend the pawn. If you try bishop e7, then that hangs the e6 pawn. So e4 would have simply been really strong for whites, but instead I decided to delay it a little bit, and I really wasn't too concerned about delaying this e4 move, but it turns out that I really should have played e4 here. e4 was the best way to maximize my opening advantage. So I go a4 instead. Again, this is inaccurate because this allows black to just castle, and maybe he can consolidate the center. But this a4 move doesn't really work well in this line when black has this giant center here. White really should be playing either e4 or at the very least develop a piece and play e4 a move later. So I go a4 here, bishop to b7, and again this allows me to play e4, but I didn't play it. I thought that you're supposed to play e4 after both sides castle, but I was wrong about that. And by the way, this guy, he blitzed out pretty much his first 10 to 11 moves in this game. I think after castles and a king h8, he blitzed everything out in like under 5 seconds, and it was just a little bit amusing to me to watch, because I really doubt that he actually prepped these lines. Otherwise, he would have punished my move order with going a4 too early. But that's how it goes sometimes. Maybe he was just bluffing. I really don't know what went on with in my opponent's head there. So I go e4, knight e4, knight e4, e4. This is the best way to respond to this, by the way. You don't want to take this way, because then after knight g5, I have more pressure on here, and in general, you just want to trade a pair of knights first. Because if I don't regain the e4 pawn right away, then maybe black will consolidate, and I'll have to move my knight back to a bad square like h3. So he attempts to hold everything together with the move bishop to d5. Now this is a really, really big mistake. It's technically the first blunder of the game, but I really didn't realize it at the time. I thought this was, a completely sensible move that I just happened to miss. I didn't quite see the way to refute this, but I played queen c2 after a long think, about 20 minutes. This is like my whole idea. I want to win back the pawn, and there really isn't a good way for him to do so. But the issue is that there is a tactical idea that Black has available to him that I had missed before going into this line, and that is, let's say, after h6, just as an example. Knight takes e4, there is bishop takes h2. And the moment I saw this idea, I really hesitated on taking back on e4 like this, but it turns out that I was just afraid of nothing, because after king takes h2, queen h4, king g1, bishop takes e4. The reason why I was hesitant to go into this was because my king's a little bit airy here, and maybe there are some double bishop sacrifices. But here I can just take on c5, and everything's hanging here, and so is the back ring. So yeah, I sort of misevaluated that whole sequence of moves. He doesn't play h6 though. Instead, he goes knight d7, which is another big mistake. I should also mention right here that, well, I'll mention it in just a second, because this is how you want to refute this. But okay, queen c2, he makes another mistake with knight d7. Apparently that just allows me to play for my idea here, but you can see on the screen that the idea that I missed was f3 here. And of course, this was one of my candidate moves. This is a very natural move in order to just eliminate that pawn and ensure that my knight gets back to safety. But for some reason, like even on this move, f3 would have just been crushing here for white. But the reason why I didn't play it was because I thought that he would be able to take on b5 at some point at the end of the line, and that wasn't really so convincing. But it turns out that after takes, I think I can just take back with the knight. And well, if he takes here, I take with the bishop, and I'm still well, we're even in material, but Black's pawn structure is a complete mess, and I have his passed a pawn, so this should be favorable for me. Let me just make sure about that. No, actually, this is the wrong line. Okay, so you want to take with the bishop instead. Okay, this makes a lot more sense. But again, I saw this position from afar, and I wasn't so convinced, because I cannot take twice on hanging on bishop takes h2 with the discovery. I don't even know what he plays here. Let's say, okay, so you can't go knight d7 because there's no trick after that. But I guess Black is just paralyzed. He doesn't really have a good move available to him. Let's say rook to a7, just as an example. I guess I can just sit and go like queen c2, queen d3, and develop my bishop, and everything should be good. Yeah, I just didn't really evaluate that properly. So he goes bishop d5, as I explained, queen to c2, knight d7, and then after a very, very long think, I think this is my longest think of the entire game, I went g3. Now this is just flat out terrible move. My idea, of course, is that I want to blunt this bishop, and after the knight moves, I want to prevent the queen from coming to h4. And you know, the main reason I justified this in my head was because I really thought that whenever Black plays h6 and I take, bishop takes h2 would be good for him, because you know my king's a little bit open, I lose a pawn here, and this bishop still is very active, and he has ideas of sacrificing on g2 even. So I didn't want any part of that, and as a result I played g3. But I made a big mistake here, because I think that Black has several ways of refuting this, or at least two good ways. Either as he played in the game with ab5, that's a good move, or the simpler move I think is knight f6, or even still that allows f3. Or yeah, actually now it's calming down a little bit and saying that knight f6 would have just equalized for Black on the spot. I think my idea after knight f6, I want to just take the pawn, and I would have just been a pawn up. But the big problem is that now these bishops are still well placed in the center here, and after h6, knight h3, my knight is sidelined on the edge like this, and that's not something I want to allow. g3, and then after ab5, I decide to cash in and take on e4 before he can defend it. And he goes bishop to e7. This is fine. You don't want to take the knights, because let's say after knight f6, I can just park my queen on h4, and a4 is well defended, and I am doing completely fine here. So knight e4, bishop to e7. I take on b5 because I have no other move. And then he goes knight e5. So I kind of saw this from a distance, and in my head I figured, okay, this move just doesn't really do anything. I just go f4, right? I go f4, kick the knight back, and everything would be good. But this move ended up being very, very weakening, and I didn't quite realize it at the time. But this f4 move, I thought initially that this move was forced, which is why I didn't spend too long on this. But this is just really, really bad. Because following something like knight c6, I think is the best move here. The knight is headed to d4, and I have to give one of my bishops. There's no way of preventing, the knight coming to d4. Let's say bishop to e3. I think that even knight d4 right now is good because this is a passed pawn, and well, I don't really have any good way of consolidating my position here because black has a very good pair of bishops. So the better move that would have still kept a very small edge for me would have been bishop to e2, but as humans, this is very, very hard to play. Knight f3 check. I mean, I really don't want to be giving up the light square bishop like this, but again, it turns out that this bishop actually isn't doing all that much because I can just play rook e1, I think, and as long as my knight is stable on e4, then everything should be relatively okay. So I go f4, and then it surprises me with knight g4 again. I thought knight c6 would have been the best move, and here, like if you had played knight c6, I would have probably played bishop to e3. I don't really want to take this, and then eventually I'm going to hope that I'll be able to consolidate there, but it wasn't looking so hot for me at this point in time. f4 and knight g4. Again, I'm not sure what this does. Maybe he just wants to go back to f6, but otherwise this knight g4 move doesn't really accomplish a whole lot. So I go bishop to e2, which is fine, just kicking the knight back. He goes knight f6, and then I play knight to c3. And at this point, I really like my position. All I have to do here is I have to play bishop to f3 at some point to trigger out the bishops. I have to get my bishop out to e3 to ensure I'm not getting mated on the two diagonals, and then eventually get a rook to d1, and I'll be able to consolidate. But black ended up getting very rapid counterplay thanks to my weakened king as well as my somewhat awkward pieces, because I can't exactly go bishop to f3 right away because my rook would end up kind of stranded on f3 there. Or not stranded, but it would have been awkward on f3. So he goes bishop to b7, bishop to e3 is fine, rook c8, and then rook a d1. And here he played a very good move that I just didn't see at all. He played the move queen b6. Now initially this looks insane because you're going in front of the bishop like this, but this is a very strong move because you're just getting the queen off to a more active square, and you have ideas. Let's say if I play some dumb move, I don't know what I would play here, but if I play some move plant bishop too far away, then he would play queen c6 and just mate me on the diagonal, just like that. So I have to be very, very careful not to allow that. I go h3. Now my idea with this is that I want to play bishop to f3, as I mentioned earlier. The issue is that after bishop f3, rook f3, I thought this move knight to g4 was super annoying for two reasons. First off, I thought that if I were to lose this bishop here, then if I were to lose this dark square bishop, then I would just get killed on this diagonal. But even if I just defended, I mean, this didn't look very, very, very appealing. I think that if I go bishop to c1, I think there is the move e5. Let's see if this is okay. No, not e5. Okay, the engine's saying knight h6 to go back to f5, but I mean, just on principle, I didn't really like having to face this. It's saying bishop to f2 is even fine because after rook f2, I thought that he would go c4 and get this, but I just play king to g2, and any checks can be met with queen to e4 because this b2 pawn is now well defended. So let's go back a little bit. But yeah, it turns out that this position is just good for white. This knight g4 move doesn't really lead anywhere, and I was a little bit too cautious of this. So bishop f3 would have been really good because it simply stops knight from coming to d5 for good. Because as long as I increase my control over that square, he won't be able to get counterplay with. Let's say if I were forced to capture on d5, then he would have two good pawns in the center. So rook d1, I go h3 in order to stop this knight g4 idea, but this is too slow because it allows him to play knight d5, which he blitzes out pretty much instantly. I'm basically compelled to take because if I don't do anything, I mean this bishop's hanging first of all. Secondly, if I just move my bishop back, let's say to f2. Knight c3, queen c3, queen c6 is basically game over. Yeah. So I had to take on d5, and now I was very annoyed because even though I'm still up a pawn, black clearly has enough counterplay and enough compensation because my bishops are simply not very active compared to black counterparts. Black is going to keep this bishop, very, very strong bishop on b7, and he's going to deploy his dark squared bishop to f6, pressuring the b2 pawn. So I was not in love with my position, and I just wanted to consolidate as best I can. And this is also at a point where I was getting into time trouble, like lower than about 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes or so. So I go bishop to f3. I'm still fine here if I play some precise moves, but it's evidently not as easy to play anymore. So he goes rook f8, bishop to f2, just avoiding the move d4 coming with tempo. And here I really thought he would play d4. d4 looked to me like clearly the best move because you were activating this bishop, and if you trade, then black gets sole control over this this diagonal for the time being. And let's say after rook e1, bishop to f6, b3. It was really unclear how I was going to how I was going to push for anything here because my bishop is just really, really sad on f2, and I think black just sits and does nothing, and white can't really make much progress. So in the game, after bishop to f2, after a little bit of a think, he plays a very surprising move, queen to b4. I wasn't sure what this idea was, but we were nearing, this is already move 27, so we still had 13 moves to reach time control, and I had, I believe, if I remember correctly, about 10 minutes or so, and maybe a little bit over 10 minutes, like 11 or 12, and I just had to move quickly to reach time control, and I would be open to a queen trade as well because I feel that my passed a pawn would be sufficient, counterplay against the rolling center that black has. So I play bishop to e1. This is simply a move to gain time because black has no other move than to go back to b6. I repeat with bishop to f2, and instead of repeating, he goes bishop to f6. So he recognizes that this is an improvement to his bishop. And I really just have to play b3 here. b3 defending the pawn, and it appears that black is fine, but so is white because let's say after d4 we can just trade again and we sort of transpose back to the line I mentioned earlier. So let's say rook e1, and with queen e4 coming, it's hard to imagine either side will lose this with correct play. So right here, this is where I got excited because I saw from distance that from right here, after when his queen was on b6 the first time, I was really, really hoping he would play bishop to f6 because I thought in my head that I had this move b4, but clearly I didn't calculate that because this move does not work. Because after rook to b1, black has this move that I just missed from a distance. After queen to a3, my bishop is loose, and I just can't do anything about that. So black would just be better here. So in the game, I took on b7, which the computer thinks is a big mistake, but yeah, just to show one quick line here, after rook b3, one of the only attempts to defend that There's queen a4, and my rook is pinned, so that's annoying. The other move that the engine claims is white's best try is after bishop to g4. You cannot go rook to b8 so easily, because after rook b6 I have good counterplay. I might be able to sacrifice on f6 at some point, or even just doubling up on the b file and exploiting the back rank here. So following something like bishop to g4, rook c7, I still play rook b6, and it says that white is only slightly worse here, and that it might be tenable with some more precise moves. Anyway, I take on b7 here because I figured, okay, I'm just going to run my a-pawn down the board, and I hope that if we ever trade queens, that my a-pawn would be good enough. So he takes on f3, I go a5, and black actually missed a very straightforward win here with move d4, because he's just going to push his pawns down the board, and if he had played d4, I would have probably resigned in the next like a couple moves or so, because I just have nothing I can do against these pawns. So I would have played like a6 here, but then d3 comes, d2, d1, and the other pawn can support it as well. So this would have been just disastrous. So after a5, he played just a very, very shocking move. I think he just completely missed that my queen was still on c2, but in his head, I think, if he flipped the board, I think in his head he wanted to go bishop to d4, because after you take, I had the in-between move, queen takes g3, and then I would take back with the gain of time on the queen. So on a surface level, if you're playing like, let's say, a fast time control, this does appear to be a sensible move, but the issue is that I had this really important resource, queen to g2, and now at the cost of one pawn, I'm able to trade queens, and we get into a rook endgame that's straight up winning for white because of black's back rank issues. My pawn is much faster than white's, and my pawn is much faster than black's, and black's d pawn is doubled. Well, he has two double d pawns, and they're too slow because I'm in time to stop it with either my king or my rook. So at this point, I figured, I actually thought that this was still around balanced, but I didn't. Again, I didn't evaluate this with like a minute on the clock. I can't, you know, it doesn't really tell the whole story. So a6, I played d3, and then I push a7. Important to play this, by the way. Don't be tempted to play rook fd1, even though I think that's still winning. I want to push my pawn all the way, just to prevent black from going behind the pawn with rook c2, followed by rook to a2, because I'm in time to play rook b8, exploiting the back rank. So a7, and then only now does he go h6. Probably a better defensive try would have been this h6 and king h7, just to get off the back rank before pushing d3, because this d3 move is really just a waste of time, and I'm going to be able to pick up that pawn anyway, sooner or later. So a6, he goes d3, I go a7, of course, h6, rook to d1, king h7, and now after rook d3, d4, I have a very simple game plan. I'm going to go king f3, king e4, which he cannot prevent. I take the pawn, and I try to trade a pair of rooks, and once that happens, the remaining black rook will be pacified to the a8 square, and I would just be able to push my pawn slowly, get my king in as close as possible, and slowly but surely, I would win the game. So d4, king f3, king g6, king e4, and as soon as I take this pawn, I was pretty sure that I would win this game. It doesn't seem like black has enough counterplay with the two rooks with enough checks, because there are some mating ideas or some counterplay ideas. Let's say if I just do nothing moves, I don't know what move there is, but let's just ignore the fact that after king f5, just ignoring the fact that I'm hanging a rook here, I'm just making an example move, rook to d1, king f4. If I just move my rook back or something, then this would actually be checkmate in two moves. So that's like the one trick that black has, is maybe he can keep my king stuck on the d file, and the black king would be able to take all my pawns. But I think after king f5, I had this move, And I think if I shield my king here, then I can play something like rook to f3 and just defend the pawn, and this would have still been good for me. But he gave a couple more checks. I go back and he trades off a pair of rooks, but now this makes my task infinitely easier because black only has one rook left and he has to go back to 8. He has no other move. So after king e4, kf6, I finish off the game very efficiently. I give a check here, which is the best move. You want to be able to go behind the pawn and also cut off the black king in the process. So king f7 here, he just moves his king back, and then now I push my pawn all the way up to h5, and then so that my king is able to come to g6 without allowing any other pawn moves. So h4, king f5, here, and I play h5 in order to rule out g5 or g6. I get my king to g6, king f8, and then I play my final two moves of the game, f5, king g8, and now I have this really nice move, rook to b6, with unavoidable mate coming up next. So he resigns here finally, and yeah, I'm just really shocked that he would go into this endgame. Maybe he just completely missed that my queen was still covering the second ring. But he definitely rushed a lot of his moves, and I think if he had taken a little bit more time, I think that he would have had great chances to finish me off, because I did not play that opening and middle game very well at all. So that's about it for that one. I'm going into the final round tomorrow morning with 5 points out of 8, and I really hope that I get a reasonable pairing this time around, so that I can have a good fight. So we'll be back tomorrow for the final recap.